Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we are going to explore a chess game from literally beyond the grave. With me is Dr. Vernon Neppe, a neuropsychiatrist who is head of the Pacific Neuropsychiatric Institute in Seattle. He is the author of numerous books, including Cry, the Beloved Mind, Reality Begins with Consciousness, and a trilogy of books about déjà vu. Welcome, Vernon.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And in introducing you, I should say something about your credentials as a chess player at the master level, a chess champion from South Africa, a person who organized the first interracial chess tournament in South Africa. In fact, the first interracial athletic event, if one considers a chess tournament to be an athletic event.
Yeah, chess match which was organized between the Witwatersrand University Chess Club. I was captain of the Witwatersrand University chess team, and we were approached by a group of players who did not have a name for their club from Soweto. They were ultimately called the Soweto Chess Club, and this became the first multiracial sports game, if chess is regarded as a sport, in South Africa. And we discovered at that stage, it was round about 1970, that it was legal provided we did not serve alcohol.
But as a chess player, you're one of the rare individuals who could play, I think you told me, as many as 80 people at one time.
That is true. I had some challenges in terms of playing chess exhibitions, and it's rather exciting because people think, oh, well, you've just got to look at each board, but of course there's the planning component, and planning in chess is the key component.
But beyond playing multiple people at one time and looking at the chessboard, you could even play blindfolded.
Yes, I used to play blindfold chess, but I have to admit I would choose my opponents very carefully because the quality of my chess would diminish down markedly.
But in any case, you're a scholar and an individual who has an understanding of what it means to play chess at the master or grandmaster level.
Yes, I try to understand that, and try to understand a piece of the history, because what we're going to discuss relates to events pertaining to a player in the early part of the 20th century. In fact, Géza Maróczy was the number 2 player in the world round about 1905. And so this is highly pertinent in relation to his ostensible, or let us say the ostensible Géza Maróczy, playing Victor Korchnoi. And Korchnoi was, strange enough, the number 2 chess player in the world round about 1980, and in fact later on became the world senior chess champion.
We're talking about a game that took place between 1987 and 1993, initiated by a Swiss scholar and researcher who had the idea that evidence for survival after death could be enhanced if it were possible to obtain the agreement of a deceased spirit who would be willing to manifest through a spiritual medium and play chess with a living grandmaster.
Yeah, this is a remarkable story. Since Maróczy's death in the very early 1950s, and suddenly a communication ostensibly partly arising from the alleged, and I'll use that word alleged repetitively, and if I don't, please understand I'm meaning alleged. I'm not trying to say this is definite or this is not definite, but from an alleged communicator beyond the grave who was a champion chess player and Dr. Wolfgang Eisenbeis, whose doctorate is in economics in Switzerland, came up with the idea that maybe, just maybe, this would be the way to be able to prove survival after bodily death.
Eisenbeis himself was an amateur chess player.
Yeah, I've gone through Eisenbeis's games, or one or two of them, and his level is that at a good, probably grade B player, he's not bad. And the reason why I went through one of his games is possibly the start of the story. It's not published, but it's very interesting because I often get people saying, well, you know, this is obviously fraud between the medium Rolands, or I've had Eisenbeis being accused of fraud. And ultimately, when one starts looking at the data, it will require a major conspiracy, because there was even a Hungarian librarian involved, and Eisenbeis did not talk any Hungarian, and a little bit of Maróczy's family, who were rather ambivalent about all of this, were also involved. But in any event, Eisenbeis, when he started and first interacted with Robert Rollins, the medium,
We did automatic writing.
well, initially, what happened was he came up with something rather interesting. He discovered that Rollins could not play any chess.
Yes.
And he had to at least teach him a little bit about the notation of chess so he could record this during automatic writing. And Eisenbeis said to him, well, you know, like, can you prove this is real? And Robert Rollins' father, late father, the medium's late father, was an avid chess player.
Oh.
And Eisenbeis, over a period of that day, played him a chess game, and that is also recorded. A very poor chess game with some interesting components of knights ending up in the corners of the board. I played through it. One of my master friends played through it. A grandmaster played through it. We all are of agreement that this was very much an amateur game. But in terms of standard, you could see he was a B-level player. And the reason, of course, is this allows him probably to have been able to interact and do this chess stuff, know something about it, but he certainly wasn't at any kind of level where he could have produced any of this.
Because what we're talking about here in terms of evidence for survival has to do with a skill, the skill of playing chess at the master or grandmaster level. And that is not a skill that can be replicated by somebody, I presume, who hasn't studied chess extensively.
That is true. And even if they had studied chess extensively, it would be very difficult for them to replicate that kind of level. So this case, at times, has been called the #1 case in terms of proof of survival after bodily death. And there are several different sources that one could argue supporting that contention, or the way they've described it. But the reason is it's not only the skills that are involved. It is a combination of skills and data. And there's an enormous amount of data that was generated.
Let's talk about that data, because as I understand it, Maróczy, through automatic writing, was asked a number of questions, detailed questions about his life when he was alive as a chess player, obscure questions about various matches and things concerning his personal life. And he was able to answer these questions through automatic writing with an incredible degree of accuracy.
Exactly that. And they divided up these questions into general questions, the kinds of questions that one could find when looking it up in libraries or from the records of chess tournaments, and very, very esoteric questions that only Maróczy would know, and that could be validated. And this is where this Hungarian librarian came in, who was not told this was a case of potential survival. He was just told that some kind of biography was being done on Géza Maróczy, and he went searching. And some of these esoteric questions required his family, but also there were answers to questions that appeared wrong and later on were shown to be right. So, for example, the famous one is the Romi, yes. R-O-M-I-H, and sometimes spelled slightly differently.
Yes.
And where Maróczy said, no, I didn't play that person. And they said, well, he did. And then it turned out that afterwards he pointed out that it was spelt differently. Mm-hmm. And another one related to Vera Menchik, who was a famous women's chess player at the time, and a question of who was linked up with a particular chess club. Mm-hmm. And people didn't know the answer until afterwards. So we're talking about not only esoterica, but esoterica that at times were not even known. And when one looked at incredible degree of accuracy, it's very interesting because Eisenbeiss and his co-author Dieter Hassler initially published the data, and they pointed out a couple of errors that Maróczy had made. Mm. And when one started looking at it, the questions were not necessarily erroneous. So, for example, Maróczy had said, spoken about the fact that he played somebody twice in a particular tournament, and effectively he scored 1 point out of 2. Now you can get that from 2 draws or from 1 win and 1 loss. Mm. And so ultimately it was correct, but it was perceived as wrong, but it was wrong in the context of win-loss instead of mm-hmm. draws or vice versa. This kind of subtlety. Mm-hmm. Another time, who came third in the tournament? Well, you know, you play chess tournaments, you might have won it, but seldom would you know who came third. And he had said one world champion had come third when another of the world champions had come third, this kind of thing. And so there were really, really subtle areas of error, even in sort of the general historical mm-hmm. data. And when it came to the esoterica, there seemed to be absolutely nothing wrong with his answers, even though no one living alive at the time could have given all those answers. And they were specially composed. Eisenbeiss composed them, and this was well researched.
Now, I can imagine a critic would say that's proof it was fraud, because you never get close to 100% accuracy in survival research or parapsychology research.
Well, of course, one could argue this both ways. Yeah. And when one looks at psi research amongst the living, and one looks at tests in labs, you're getting nowhere near 100% accuracy. You might statistically get accuracy and score over 1,000 hits and be at the 52% level when you expect it to be statistically at the 50% level. Mm-hmm. The data in survival research is much, much higher in regard to this. And of course, somebody like Gary Schwartz has also found the same kind of figure. But the important thing is about the accuracy, that some of these things appeared wrong. And we knew them as wrong. So if they were fraudulent, one would have stayed with the wrong bits of information mm-hmm. because it was thought to be right. And later on has been found that Maróczy's answers were correct and these were incorrect. So the important point here, and this to me is the key to this whole case, there are 2 keys. The one is data and skills. Amazing when you put them together. Mm-hmm. The second is the interesting one of extended survival. You see, it's not a case of, oh, well, they played this game quickly over a period of a few minutes, and maybe Korchnoi was fabricating this all, or maybe some other master was involved and quickly consulting with Roland's, and the moves were delivered to Eisenbeiss, and they were delivered by automatic writing, so there is a record of these. And I want to write a play in this. And Wolfgang Eisenbeis has been kind enough to send me all the transcripts he has available, so I've been able to see these in a written format as well. So the idea of survival here is not just a fragment moment of survival. Maybe this was a memory or something caught in space. This was over a period of maybe 6 years. And it was over a period of time when, strangely enough, a prediction was made that Rollins would be able to complete this. And he did, and then he died. Which was just another esoteric piece of information. Yeah. And of course his wife has been interviewed as well. And this was the most honest of individuals, apparently, who did a lot of mediumship, never accepted a penny for this, had no real, let us say, financial motivation to do this. And nor did Eisenbeis. Eisenbeis kept this very, very quiet for some years.
It wasn't until 2006, I believe, or 2007, that he published his analysis of all of the information that the ostensible spirit of Maróczy had provided. And
yeah, he was encouraged to do this, but it was years later. He had no intention of really achieving great publicity out of it. But strangely enough, there were some important components that came about, because in the middle of the game, the press somehow got hold of it, and they ran a story. And so it could be argued, well, if this was fraud, they were also keeping a great eye on this all the way through the second half. And there was a Swiss champion, chess champion at the time, who also very early on had gone through this. And Korchnoi had later on commented, even before the end of the game, how well Maróczy was playing. He wasn't even sure if he was going to win the game. And so there were these different elements. But later on, there was another person who ostensibly examined it beyond me at a far, far higher level of chess.
And we're talking now about the American chess grandmaster Bobby Fischer, who was the brother-in-law, it turns out, of parapsychologist Russell Targ.
Yes, and it was apparently through Russell that this all came about. And Russell, probably at Bobby Fischer's request, and of course Bobby Fischer, some would argue, is the greatest world chess champion in the history of chess. He might have been the greatest player in the history of chess, but of course became extremely psychotic, as is well known, and there have been movies made about it. But possibly as a consequence of Russell, I understand that Bobby Fischer also went through this game.
Move by move.
I haven't got the detail he went through, because, you know, when you're playing at that level of chess, you can virtually eyeball the whole chess game and know what is going on. But his comment was anyone who could give that kind of level of fight to Bobby Fischer over that number of moves.
You mean Korchnoi?
To Korchnoi, yes, was somebody who was probably playing at grandmaster level. This was not my evaluation, though.
But you did also your own evaluation, move by move, of the match.
Yes, but the most important component was, I read this report and I thought, this is very interesting. And I published this in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, making comments about my strengths and weaknesses historically as a chess player.
You don't consider yourself a grandmaster?
No, and I gave up chess many, many years ago. However, I said to myself, this is something that needs to be sought after. And we had a control, and that was computers. Now, computers in the late 1970s, early 1980s are not like chess computers today. Chess computers today, I'm afraid, this is one of the last bastions of humanity beating up robots and artificial intelligence, and it's failed. It's failed because chess computers now can beat even world champions. But in those days, that was not so. And I took a chess computer program that I had, and I would actually regularly play. I regularly play this program, that probably plays at the low master level. I win in maybe 98% of cases. So this is the kind of level it's playing. It's certainly very beatable.
Yeah.
But this was the level of chess computers of the day. And the question came up, maybe, just maybe, all this is fraud. The chess computers could possibly have faked this all, or somebody could have faked it through the chess computers. And what we found was that, first of all, the style of Maróczy, and when you're at that level, world championship level, even in 1905, you have particular kinds of styles.
Based on the cultural, historical era.
And also based on the individual player.
Okay.
Every player plays differently. You can recognize the games almost of a Bobby Fischer, somewhat. You can recognize the games of an Alexander Alekhine. You can recognize the games of Akiba Rubinstein. You can recognize the games of Nimzowitsch. In the same way you could recognize the games of Maróczy. And so this stylistically was so. And so I set this computer such that what would he respond, or what would she respond, or it respond, give it a personality. Maybe in today's PC world we'll say she.
Okay.
But what would the computer respond? And we were able to see that this was pretty much impossible for the computer to have replicated this game. And I played the game as well, and could see it in the same kind of fabric. We were dealing almost with somebody who was expressing a personality structure, because, when you play chess weekly, you're not expressing that structure. When you play chess at that kind of level, you are. There's a style that you have. And this was the style of Maróczy, just like there was a style of Fischer.
So in addition to skill and information, you're saying the personality of Maróczy came through in this example.
And it came through also in some of these questions, the Romy question, the Vera Menchik question. And I used the example of Fischer. And there is a funny story which might illustrate the link up a little more.
Yes.
I had the good fortune to lecture in South Africa on the Fischer-Spassky chess series. And in one of the games, one of my listeners who would listen avidly, the games would come through, the move would come through on radio at the time, and I would say, Fischer's next move will be X. Sure enough, Fischer's next move would be X. And somebody came up to me excitedly and said, who knows, it was 37 moves or something of this sort, the game. And he said, you got the same move as Bobby Fischer 35 of the 37 times. And I said, that's why I'm not Bobby Fischer, because chess is an absolute unit. And when one looked at this Maróczy game, he was losing it by playing an inferior move very early on in the opening. And this wasn't really his fault, because that was the move that would have been played in 1905. And when he came back and was playing more chess in the 1930s, for example, the alternative refutation was unknown when he passed. As far as I remember, it was in 1951. So his move was what was known then, and it was a good move, but it was not the appropriate move for the 1970s and 1980s.
And the ostensible spirit of Maróczy said he was rusty. This is a game in the 1980s.
He made the comment that he was rusty. And
he hadn't kept up his chess skills.
When we did an analysis, we said, okay, maybe he was playing at the high master level. Some would say the grandmaster level. I mean, Fisher said, well, this is like a grandmaster. Yeah. I think it was at the high master level or even at the low master level. You've got to understand that chess theory has so developed that in order to keep up with chess, you have to keep up with the theory, and it takes a long, long time. People are full-time professional chess players. They spend 6-8 hours a day training in their chess, studying opening chess theory, studying things. And when you prepare for a world championship, like Magnus Carlsen, the current world chess champion, he was lifting weights. He was playing a lot of table tennis. He was getting as fit as anything because it is so stressful and so difficult in terms of physical components. So there's the physical aspect that would go on, and there's the absolute preparation, such that lowly I, at this stage, or when I was playing chess regularly and was keeping up with it, it is possible that I could have beaten the Maróczy of 1905, not because he wasn't much, much better than me, but because chess theory is such that he might have failed because of ideas that change. Now, once you have a minimal advantage in chess, if you're a really good chess player, you can carry through that minimal advantage and you win as a consequence of it. Even if you're playing against a world chess champion sometimes, they might be able to get a draw, but they might not be able to. But of course, they don't give up those minimal advantages. They are too good for that.
And of course, in this particular match, Korchnoi did win.
Yes, Korchnoi did win. And so this put paid to the idea that, well, if this was going to be fabricated, wouldn't have it been nice if Maróczy won? And, it's fascinating when you start looking at how the media talks about it. In fact, in one of the Bobby Fischer movies, they talked about people who were mad in chess, and they pointed to Fischer, and they pointed to Steinitz, and Wolfgang Steinitz, as far as I remember, way back in the 19th century, announced that he wanted to play God because he said he would beat God in chess. And so you go backwards in time, and who was quoted? Poor Korchnoi. But they didn't say he played it. He said there was this chess champion grandmaster, one of the leading players in the world, who claimed he played a ghost. And this is ridiculous. And they made a joke about it. And when you start looking at it, extended survival over a period of time is quite something. And because of it, you've got to look at all the alternative explanations.
Vernon Neppe, our time is up, but this has been a fascinating discussion of what is probably, while not 100% conclusive, one of the strongest cases we have for evidence of survival after death. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for being with us.